Why refugees are being rejected more than ever in these countries. You can't stay here. They cross oceans. They flee wars. They leave everything behind to escape what no one chooses. Collapse, persecution, hunger. And when they arrive, they hear one sentence more than ever before. You can't stay here. In 2025, refugee rejection has reached its highest global level in decades. Not because fewer are fleeing, because more nations have decided the door is closed. The era of silent refusal. In the post-war era, the right to seek asylum was considered a cornerstone of the global order. But in 2025, that order is fragmenting, and asylum itself is under siege, across Europe, North America, and parts of the global South. Refugee rejection rates have quietly surged, even in countries that once championed open-door policies. Not through dramatic wall-building or explosive rhetoric, but through policy architecture, legal maneuvering, and the quiet erosion of pathways that once existed. The reasons are layered. Public fatigue, fueled by inflation, housing pressure, and security fears, the rise of hardline populist coalitions in parliaments. Bilateral deals shifting refugee responsibility onto weaker neighbors, and an international system too fractured to enforce. Humanitarian obligations according to leaked UNHCR data and internal memos from border agencies. Global asylum recognition rates in 2025 have dropped by nearly 40% compared to a decade ago, even as displacement numbers hit record highs. Governments no longer need to say no. Outright, they create the conditions where arrival becomes impossible. Paperwork becomes a dead end, or detention becomes the only answer. And behind the numbers are people stuck in border camps, pushed back into war zones, or erased from systems entirely. In this report, we examine 6 countries where this shift is now policy, not exception, and where rejection has become a new form of defense strategy. Let's begin with the country that turned asylum into an international export. 1. United Kingdom exporting the right to seek asylum in 2025. The UK no longer processes most asylum claims on its own soil. Instead, it outsources the responsibility. Under the UK's expanded migration and economic development, partnership first launched with Rwanda and now replicated with Ghana and Armenia asylum seekers, who arrive irregularly, are flown to third countries for processing. They are told, "You will not stay here. You will be evaluated elsewhere." Critics call it exile by bureaucracy. According to internal Home Office documents leaked in February 2025, over 85% of new arrivals are being placed in offshore transfer categories. Legal protections have been weakened under the Illegal Migration Act, which bars anyone entering illegally from accessing the UK asylum system at all, regardless of their origin or circumstances. This includes individuals from conflict zones such as Sudan, Syria, and Afghanistan. While the government insists the policy breaks the smuggling model. Data from the Refugee Council shows that asylum approvals have plummeted by 70% since 2022, and those sent to Rwanda or Armenia, few have been granted permanent protection. Some have disappeared entirely from monitoring databases. NGO access to detention facilities near Dover and Manston has been restricted. Surveillance footage leaked anonymously reveals rapid deportations conducted under military escort, often without legal representation. What was once a nation of legal refuge is now a testing ground for outsourced asylum denial. And the message is clear. If you arrive in the UK without permission, you won't be judged here. You'll be sent away and forgotten. 2. Italy closed ports and criminalist rescue. Italy has always been on the front line of Europe's migration crisis. But in 2025, it has turned that front line into a border of refusal by sea, by law, and by silence. Under a right-wing government backed by hardline parties, Italy has enacted a naval blockade policy in the central Mediterranean. Boats carrying asylum seekers are intercepted by the Italian Navy and redirected to Tunisian or Libyan coast guards under secretive bilateral agreements. Humanitarian rescue missions have been criminalist. NGOs like Sea-Watch and SOS Mediterranee now face impoundments, legal threats, and coordinated smear campaigns. Leaked Ministry of Interior documents reveal a classified directive authorizing covert disruption of civil maritime assets assisting migrants through fuel restrictions, inspection delays, and satellite surveillance interference. The result: thousands stranded at sea, while those who make landfall are funneled into a fast-track rejection process. In 2024 alone, over 20,000 asylum applications were denied under new, accelerated inadmissibility rules. Appeals are delayed for months or blocked entirely by procedural technicalities. Satellite images from Lampedusa and Calabria show expanded containment zones, with perimeter fencing and military patrols. Refugee access to legal counsel and UN representation has been slashed by more than half. Since 2023, Italy's new position is not shouted from podiums, it is executed through policy layers, naval coordination, and legal dead ends. No asylum seeker is told outright, "You're not human." But in practice, they are told, "You're not ours." 3. Poland. Legal walls behind the physical ones. Poland's physical wall along the Belarusian border is complete. 5.5 meters of steel, sensors and floodlights spanning 186 kilometers. But in 2025, the real barrier isn't made of metal. It's made of law. Since the 2021 Belarus-orchestrated border crisis, Poland has refused to register most asylum claims from Middle Eastern and African refugees crossing from the east. Instead, it labels these individuals illegal entrants engaged in hybrid aggression, a term taken directly from military doctrine. A 2025 amendment to Poland's Border Act formalized this stance. It grants authorities the right to deny asylum without review, conduct pushbacks without due process, and detain claimants indefinitely at undisclosed sites nearby a Wega forest. According to leaked Frontex reports, Polish forces have conducted over 13,000 illegal re-entries into Belarus since 2023, many involving vulnerable persons, including families with children. EU legal observers have been denied access to these zones, now classified as border security corridors. It's administered jointly by the Interior Ministry and Armed Forces Command. Polish civil society groups report harassment and surveillance for offering food or legal assistance. Inside Poland, public support for asylum continues to decline. Driven by nationalist media and political rhetoric equating refugees with foreign threat proxies, what Poland offers is not a new wall, it's a new legal model. Reject asylum not by denying it, but by preventing it from being considered at all. For Australia, the return of maritime deterrence, Australia's offshore detention regime was once the most controversial in the world. By 2022, it had been partially dismantled. But in 2025, the policy has returned, branded, hardened, and further removed from public scrutiny. Following a wave of maritime arrivals across the Timor and Arafura seas, Australia reactivated Operation Sovereign Borders with classified extensions. Boats are now intercepted by the Royal Australian Navy and handed over to contracted private security forces with no formal processing on shore. Leaked Defense Department documents from early 2025 describe high-threat interdictions in which asylum seekers are either towed to undisclosed Pacific locations or held on maritime platforms for weeks. There is no media access, no oversight, and no confirmed numbers. Attempts to reach Australia by boat now result in mandatory offshore containment. The only exceptions are military defectors or high-profile cases negotiated under secret intelligence cooperation. Legally, Australia has changed the language replacing refugee. With unlawful maritime arrival across all government documentation, this semantic shift allows the state to deny asylum applications at sea, bypassing judicial review. Domestic courts have been restrained through emergency national sovereignty clauses embedded in the 2024 Border Reform Act, limiting their jurisdiction over military-led detentions. Even air arrivals from refugee-producing countries now face automatic detention upon disembarkation, unless pre-cleared by the Department of Home Affairs. Australia's position is clear. No arrival equals no process, and no process means no path. 8. Tunisia, the European Union's undeclared border. Tunisia, once a migrant departure point, is now a containment zone, one constructed with European funding and maintained through military coordination. In 2023, the EU signed a controversial migration deal with Tunisia, offering financial aid, border technology, and debt relief. In exchange, Tunisia agreed to intercept migrant boats, restrict NGO activity, and expand internal detention networks. By 2025, that deal has become the EU's most effective offshoring mechanism. Leaked correspondence between EU migration officials and the Tunisian Ministry of Interior reveals joint patrol protocols, equipment transfers, and quiet allowances for EU drones to operate in Tunisian airspace. According to reports by Amnesty International and SANS, Tunisia has forcibly relocated thousands of sub-Saharan migrants to holding zones near the Libyan border. Lawless areas where humanitarian access is blocked, most asylum seekers never formally register. There is no functional asylum system in Tunisia, and those detained cannot appeal or receive representation. In several cases documented by NGOs, individuals were left without food or water, abandoned in desert regions as a deterrence measure. Despite this, Tunisia is still considered a safe third country by several EU states. Deportation flights from Italy and France continue, returning individuals to a country they never passed through legally. Tunisia now functions as Europe's outer wall, unmarked, unofficial, and increasingly authoritarian. It doesn't need to say no to refugees, it simply never lets them through. 6. United States fast-tracked refusals and border gray zones in 2025. The U.S.-Mexico border remains one of the world's most heavily policed migration corridors, but the mechanisms of rejection have become faster, quieter, and harder to challenge. Under expanded powers granted to the Department of Homeland Security in the 2024 Security Enforcement Modernization Act, asylum claims can now be rejected within 48 hours of apprehension. Without court review, if the applicant crossed outside designated entry points, the so-called expedited removal protocol now applies to nearly 80% of land border arrivals. Meanwhile, a controversial mobile app system, originally designed to streamline appointments, now functions as a gatekeeper. Those without a digital appointment face automatic denial, regardless of need or origin. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has admitted that less than 5% of asylum seekers ever receive appointment access. According to leaked memos from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Border Patrol agents have been instructed to prioritize deterrence over referral, often issuing credible fear rejections with pre-written templates. Family detention has resumed in temporary transit processing centers, many operated by private security contractors. Access to legal counsel remains minimal. UNHCR observers have been denied entry to 3 such facilities since February 2025. Most deportees are returned under Title 42 successor policies, now framed as public health plus national security hybrids. The same legal logic that once excused pandemic expulsions now justifies permanent fast-track removal zones. The U.S. doesn't say it rejects refugees. It says they fail to qualify in a system designed to reject them by design. When rejection becomes strategy once, asylum was a right. Now it's a process engineered to fail. Across the globe in 2025, refugee rejection is no longer framed as cruelty. It's framed as logistics, sovereignty, and national interest. Governments no longer say, "We won't help." They say, "We're full," or "You came the wrong way," or "There's a process, but you're not in it." And with every legal tweak, every offshoring contract, every redefinition of what qualifies as an arrival, the principle of protection becomes just another form of border control. The countries in this report, the UK, Italy, Poland, Australia, Tunisia, and the US, are not acting alone. Their policies are being mirrored, shared, and copied. Their tactics, military escorts, legal voids, data-driven screening, are becoming standard practice. Refugees today are not met with gunfire. They are met with procedural dead ends, biometric checkpoints, and blank rejection letters. And yet the world is seeing more displacement than ever before. Climate collapse, political breakdown, permanent conflict zones. Over 150 million people are expected to be forcibly displaced by the end of this decade. But borders are hardening faster than solutions, and the global asylum system is not broken. It is being dismantled deliberately. Refugee rejection is no longer about capacity. It's about control. And if this trend continues, the very concept of asylum will be remembered not as a legal right, but as a historical phase that ended when the world chose borders over lives, not with violence, but with silence, policy, and the quiet turning away of millions.